speak today from occupied land. Stanford is an uninvited occupier of the traditional and unceded lands of the Muwekma Ohlone. As we think together about changing tides today, I want us to consider what it might take to commit to solidarity with Indigenous and other marginalized peoples who have lived on and cared for this land, this water, and the air that we breathe, especially in the daily work we do in the classroom as instructors and students. In his 2021 film, Exterminate All the Brutes, Haitian filmmaker Raoul Peck says, "You already know enough, so do I. It is not knowledge we lack. What is missing is the courage to understand what we know and to draw conclusions." Across our disciplines, we have read enough for long enough about the imperative and urgent need to dismantle white Euro-US canons and curricula, to address the sustained epistemic violence of center-periphery relations, and to smash white supremacist, heteropatriarchal colonial epistemes. It is not knowledge we lack. The police murder of George Floyd on May 25, 2020, sparked massive, incandescently powerful protests, forcing a reckoning with systemic racism and embedded structures of inequality in the US. This, in turn, galvanized forceful student protests and testimonies at universities, including our own and in my department as well, that underscored the epistemic violence of rendering BIPOC, Muslim, queer, Dalit, and so many other histories and cultures invisible or marginal in our curricula and our canons, revealing how the university mirrors settler colonial and imperialist politics of erasure. This could be a moment of profound change if we use it to unshackle our imaginations of what is possible in terms of altering our pedagogical work, the way we do research, our practices, and the entire educational systems within which they are carried out. What it demands is not some minor tinkering with existing curricula, not the tokenistic reform of adding the odd BIPOC scholar in our syllabi, or making alternative lists and canons. All of this happened in 2020 and its wake. Reform, as Saidiya Hartman reminds us, is the modality of reproducing the machine, reproducing the order and sustaining it. Rather, how might we imaginatively meet the call for decentering, de-universalizing, decolonizing, de-imperializing our systems of education, and in particular, the way we rethink our disciplines. Many of us come from various disciplines today. The many student protests I'm trying to see. The many student protests and petitions at multiple institutions over the past year include demands to foundationally and radically diversify syllabi. Students said simply adding one or two texts is not enough. To rethink undergraduate and graduate methods courses to include decolonial and anti-racist theoretical paradigms in PhD methods courses and in undergraduate senior seminars. To recognize that race, gender, sexuality are not side topics for specific weeks, usually in the latter weeks of most courses, but are central to any analysis of the disciplines we are in. There was a demand as well to hire BIPOC faculty at all levels, including tenured senior faculty in decision-making positions. A demand as well to change distribution requirements. One of the student petitions said, why do we have a single non-Western requirement, a distribution requirement, or a few non-Western survey courses, while Euro-US theory, contexts, movements, and authors have dedicated courses? Listening to student complaints with what Sarah Ahmad calls a feminist year is to recognize complaint as a phenomenology of the institution. These demands from the students alert us to the swathe of conceptual and practical repairs we need to undertake. Why can't African literature be at the center so we can view other cultures in relationship to it, asked the great Kenyan writer Ngugi wa Thiong'o. While it may seem a near impossible task to de imperialize university curricula across the world globally, given how the very epistemic foundations of our disciplines are shaped by the colonial matrix of power through the forces of capitalism and neoliberal globalization, we can and we must work towards decolonial horizons of polycentric, dialogic, connected, reciprocal knowledges. This is not a one time or one size fits all fix, but a continued commitment to repair and care. It is to see more clearly who is structurally inside and outside our institutions. So, towards this, I propose a pedagogy of reparations that recognizes and diagnoses our current pedagogies as pedagogies of occupation, an occupation of our ways of thinking and being in the world. Maori thinker Linda Tuhiwai Smith asserts that research is one of the dirtiest words in the indigenous world's vocabulary, with its inextricable links to European imperialism and colonialism. Reparations demand clear eyed accountability for acts in the past and our place in them, so we might be able to envision other futures. Academic reparations call for community accountability from all of us. Reparations are not about benevolence or charity. Reparations are our duty and our obligation. We owe it to our increasingly diverse, racially, ethnically, regionally, sexually diverse student bodies. So, what does a pedagogy of reparations look, sound, and feel like? It commits to curricula that critique hegemonic, colonial, settler colonial, cis heteropatriarchal, ethnocentrist, casteist epistemologies. It demands that we recognize and situate our own positionality. It asks, what will our classrooms look like when we move from stories of innocence to complicity? It resists minor curricular reform, the hush money, the reluctant bribe of the one Black or the one queer or the one non-Western scholar or Western text in the syllabus. And it thinks through the relationship between epistemic violence and state violence. Rather than cynically shrug off or grow numb to the many calls for re-envisioning our fields, we need a proliferation of manifestos, of demands, of counter-manifestos that become impossible to ignore. A pedagogy of reparations embraces proliferation as an aesthetic and a method over universalism and calls on us to practice proliferation as an anti-assimilationist strategy. What does our writing and teaching look like when we stop being what Jamaican scholar Sylvia Wynter calls accomplices in an epistemic contract, whose function is to provide the unitary system of meaning on whose basis this entire order is aggregated? A reparative research and pedagogical approach demands that we de-imperialize theory. De-imperializing theory demands a move away from the practice of applying some kind of universal theory, that is, Anglo-Atlantic texts, to all theory or to all subjects that we study. Theory emerges from texts in all their rich specificity and history and in conversation with multiple intersecting traditions. De-imperializing theory means globalizing theory. De-imperializing theory calls for a commitment to familiarizing ourselves with scholarship from the global South by US third world feminists, the Black radical tradition, anti-caste thinkers, global indigenous studies, among many other traditions. A reparative pedagogy is not limited to diversifying just the texts we teach, but structurally alters how we teach these texts. It is a commitment to constant self-education. A pedagogy of reparations calls on us to refuse curricula that homogenize continents, peoples, and cultural forms. It makes apparent the geopolitical histories of the formation of our disciplines, the role of publishing priorities and blind spots in building disciplinary scaffolds, what research and archives get funding and support, the translation of non-English scholarship, reading lists for PhD qualifying exams and dissertations, and so much more. Some of the day-to-day classroom practices of a reparative pedagogy include decentering dominant modes of reading, noticing how the framing texts and theories for a course convey its value systems, and assigning self-reflexive texts that invite students to question and challenge the selections within a syllabus, ensuring a more multivocal and participatory pedagogy. Where comfort and habit are used to buttress occupation, teacherly discomfort, epistemic unsettling, and crises of pedagogical faith are the affective dispositions of a pedagogy of reparations. And what I have here is an initiative called the First Day, First Image, where artists are encouraged to use images by BIPOC queer artists as the first image they show in an art history class. I'm in the Department of Art and Art History. Decentering the white Western canon is not only the work of specific courses and faculty members, but should permeate all curricular design. At an administrative level, a departmental commitment to a pedagogy of reparations requires us to advocate for faculty at risk, including contingent, BIPOC, untenured, minoritized, disproportionately service-burdened faculty. Sarah Ahmed frames complaint as the work we have to do because the university is not built for us. That we find each other through complaining is a finding. And we leave something of us behind by complaining. By insisting on the collectivity of complaint, we might envision an undercommons of complaint, an undercommons of complainers, of killjoys, a coalition of people who complain that chip away course after course at occupying academic structures. A critical pedagogy recognizes that reparations can only be made by fundamentally altering the terms of engagement. So we walk away from the logics of profit and possession to steal the enlightenment for others, to steal with a tragic optimism, to paraphrase Fred Moten and Stefano Harney. Deoccupation is a pedagogical praxis founded on radical love and unbounded sociality that promises to transform our university curricula and cultures. Through the many facets of our relationship with the university as educators, marked variously by empowerment, resistance, implication, a reparative pedagogy enjoins us to see clearly and dangerously. Thanks to our students' vociferous and persistent demands, we might turn this into a moment of joyous usurpation, seizing with an insurgent radical optimism some part of the means of education before decolonization, deuniversalization, deimperializing cease to be fashionable once again. Let us never forget that our classrooms are a central arena for imagining and making other futures. Thank you.